Hi, my name is Lily and welcome back to my channel. So October is over and now I am going to give you a wrap up of all the books I read in October. If you watched my September wrap up, you'll know I had a very successful month in September and I read 11 books. However, October has been significantly less successful. It has been the first month that I've been working full-time for a whole month, which is probably why I've not read as much. I've read 5 books this month, which I will say is kind of disappointing compared to September, and I think honestly a big part of it is because the books I have been reading have not been as good as the ones I read in September. I read loads of 5-star and 4-star reads in September, and this month it just hasn't quite hit the mark, and honestly without some extra audiobooks I would be really a lot worse off. I think I'm looking at my stack, I think I only read 2 of the ones in my stack physically, which is really bad. I'm going to show you really quickly, I guess, the 5 books that I read this month. The first book I read this month was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I think I actually started this in September and finished it in early October. This book I haven't given a rating because of the subject matter. It was very difficult to even try and review this book because of what it's about. So if you don't know, My Dark Vanessa is about a girl called Vanessa who gets a scholarship to go to a private boarding school. And at this boarding school, she has an English teacher. Her English teacher, Jacob Strain, seems to have a slight obsession with Vanessa from very early on. He pays her compliments and treats her differently to everyone else in the class, and over time it becomes very clear that he is interested in Vanessa sexually and starts to groom her. And My Dark Vanessa tells the story in 2 parts. It tells it from the perspective of Vanessa as a teenager when Jacob Strain is grooming her and they're in this relationship, and then when she is in her either late 20s or early 30s when she is no longer sexually involved with Strain, but he is still a strong presence in her life. And another girl who went to the same school as her has started to accuse Strain of sexual assault. This is a really difficult book to read. I think just from the subject matter you can guess what all of the trigger warnings are going to be, and that's why I would say you have to go into this book very carefully. If you can't handle that kind of thing, do not read this book because it is very graphic. But what I did like about the book is because it's from Vanessa's perspective, you really get to see how grooming happens and how it gets into the minds of teenagers and children. And it's very interesting seeing it from Vanessa's perspective as an adult as well, because people often ask, well, why didn't these people report what happened to them? Why didn't they, when they were adults, realise what had happened? And you can see as Vanessa is an adult that she hasn't realised that this was abuse, and she thinks they were in love and it was a relationship, and she stands firm by that, and that's why she actually still has contact with Strain. And that was so interesting and very difficult to read about. That's the summary of this book. It's very difficult, but I feel like it's a very important read if it's something that you can handle. With the Me Too movement, it's kind of not at the forefront of the media anymore, but it is still a very important movement. And I think with that movement happening, it's important to read these kinds of books if you are able to understand where people are coming from and why they're only speaking out now. I thought it was written incredibly sensitively, even though it was very graphic and you don't hear the things you want to hear. It's not a perfect happy ending. It's not, you know, and then she goes to court and everything is resolved. Like, that's just not life, and I think that's why I really enjoyed this book. It's hard to say you enjoyed a book that's about sexual violence and about paedophilia, but it is a very well written book. It's a very I don't know, I guess it's a very highbrow book, I guess. It's a difficult read. It uses a lot of language that I found quite difficult to understand at times, but I think that really played into the sense of Vanessa becomes an adult at a very young age, at least she thinks she does, and she has to sort of grow up very quickly, and that's very much reflected. And I thought it was really interesting to read about how this assault and what happened to her really impacted the rest of her life up until we meet her again in her 30s. The next book I read mostly by audiobook, I think, even though I do own a physical copy, and that is Caramo by Caramo Brown. This is Caramo's autobiography. If you don't know who he is one of the stars of Queer Eye, and he is the culture expert, and his sort of role on Queer Eye is to kind of get these people to realise who they really are and to come into themselves and gain confidence and those kind of things. This is Caramo's story from when he was a young child all the way up to the present day, and I found it very enlightening actually, because I think when you watch Queer Eye, you kind of expect that Caramo has it all together and that his life has been fine, because he doesn't really talk on the show much about what he's been through in the way that some of the others on Queer Eye do. But actually it's kind of enlightening to hear what he went through and how that made him who he is and how that taught him the way that he thinks now. And I actually really enjoyed listening to the audiobook because it is read by Caramo. And whilst it's a very sad book, you know, you find out that he was abused and he later went on to become an abuser and had to work through that to stop being an abusive partner. You hear about his drug addictions, and it's very difficult to read. Again, I think maybe that's why I've not read many books this month, because I read 2 very difficult books. But it is a very engrossing read. He writes it in a way that invites you into his story and doesn't make you feel like you're encroaching or that you're entering into a space that you are not welcome. It's a very warm book at the end of the day, and I think it has some really great messages in there. So if you do love a good autobiography, I do think this one is very good. After a couple of really heavy books, I decided I needed something a little bit lighter, so I read Going the Distance, which is the 2nd book in the Kissing Booth series. I believe it's the last book as well. I don't think she has plans to write another one. This is just pure nonsense and fluff, and it's so much fun to read. It's very, very different from what I see the film is like. I haven't watched the film yet, but this looks like it's got quite a different plot in certain senses to the film. So the first book in the Kissing Booth series was about a kissing booth that was set up and how Elle Evans ended up kissing Noah Flynn, the hot bad boy in the school, but he also happens to be the older brother of her best friend, and they end up secret dating and lots of shenanigans happen from there. In Going the Distance, it continues the story of Noah and Elle, but Noah is now thousands of miles away in Harvard while Elle is still doing her senior year. And Elle finds out that he's getting really friendly with a girl at Harvard, and that's putting her on edge. And also there's a new boy in school that seems to be showing interest in her, which sort of makes her think, should she be sticking with Noah? And then you have the added bit of drama that her best friend now has a girlfriend and they're looking at going to university together, except Elle always thought she'd be going to university with him and they'd be going to this one particular university, and that doesn't look like it's their future anymore. So it's all up in the air for Elle, and it's all very dramatic, and yeah, it's quite an intense read in that sort of sense. There's a lot of drama going on in Elle's life, which, to be fair, teenagers I knew in their final years of school seems pretty accurate. Now, this book is not great. It's pure fluff. It's not very well written. The first book was written when the author was 15 years old, and it was written by a British author but set in America, and you could really tell at times. This book is, I would say, it's sort of marginally better on that front, but the plot is very lacking. I would say the events of the book don't really seem to impact Elle's life much. By the end of the book, she's pretty much in the same position as she was at the start of the book. Like, very, very little changes for her. And that was what was really unsatisfying. You almost want her to break up with Noah and go with the new guy, because that would make it a bit more interesting. It was kind of bland, but it was an easy, fun read, and that's why I picked it up. I think I gave it 3 stars. The next book I don't actually have on me because I borrowed it from the library and I've now returned it, and that was With the Fire on High by Alice Acevedo, and this book was a joy. I really, really loved it. I'm so glad I read it. I first read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I really enjoyed that book, which made me want to look into her other books. When my library reopened recently, I decided to go down and sign up, and then I was like, well, I've signed up, so I should probably pick up a book while I'm here because it feels only right. So I did, and I decided to pick up With the Fire on High, and oh, it's such a lovely book. With the Fire on High is about Emily. She is a teen mum who is no longer together with the father of her child, and he also goes to a different school and lives in a completely different neighbourhood to her. And she is a sort of culinary whiz. It's really in her bones, in her blood. She's never had any training, but she just loves food and cooking, and you can really read that through the book. But unfortunately, she feels like she's going to have to choose between pursuing her love of cooking and getting a job, because she needs to be able to support her baby, because her grandmother can't do that for her forever, and her father's kind of half out of the picture. He's moved back to Puerto Rico, and her mum has died. It's a very bittersweet novel. You spend the whole time wanting the best for Emily and also knowing that the best for her might not be achievable with her income. But I do think this book ends up being a very hopeful book that sort of teaches you that you can find a way, and it's often about fostering community, and if you can create those links within your community will come back and support you. And I really, really like that message. And I also really loved the food aspect of it. I really love food. I love cooking. Not quite to the level of Emily because I don't have that level of like innate skill, but I just loved the way food was woven in, and it all became part of the emotion, part of the atmosphere. And every event in the book is marked by food or a food hosting or like an event circling around food. And that was really lovely. Pretty sure I rated this one 5 stars, so I couldn't find any issues with it. I thought it was done really sensitively, it felt very realistic, and I really liked how mature Emily was about the fact that she was a mother, so she doesn't try and engage in willy-nilly relationships. When a boy starts to show interest in her, she's very cautious about it, and I thought that really reflected how I see a lot of teen mothers acting. They tend to be so very sensitive people, and I love that. The final book I read this month was Farmer Giles of Ham by J.R. Tolkien. This is one of his really short, I guess it's like a novella. This is the pocket edition. I think it's a collector's edition perhaps. I'm not sure. I got it really cheap quite a few years ago now in Waterstones, and I actually listened to this one over on Scribd because it was about 2 hours long, so I listened to it while I was cooking and cleaning on one day, I think. And honestly, I really enjoyed this. I was a bit skeptical because I find The Lord of the Rings a bit too dense and heavy. I'm going to give it another go now that I'm older, but when I tried to read it as a teenager, it was too much for me. But this is definitely a children's story, and it's so much lighter. It's got really great sort of humour. It's got that kind of old-fashioned fable vibe to it that I really, really enjoyed. It feels a bit like a extended fairy tale. It's got dragons and giants and all sorts in it. It's so much fun. It's kind of hard to explain what it's about, but it's kind of about a farmer who lives in this place called Ham, and he sort of accidentally scares away a giant. And I just don't know how to explain this. But he kind of accidentally becomes the hero of the village, and he has to try and scare off this dragon. And I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to tell you like the whole plot of the book, but it's really fun and really silly. I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars, so I just really enjoyed it. The audiobook version on Scribd is really fun as well, so if you have Scribd, I would recommend that. Okay, so those are all the books that I read in October. As I said, bit of a disappointing month. I haven't read as many as I like, but I'm hoping November will be a bit better because I've already picked up a more exciting couple of reads. I think according to Goodreads I'm actually reading about 7 or 8 books right now, which is probably why I didn't finish many in October, because I've got like halfway through a lot and then switched. But oh well. It was still a good month in some ways because I discovered a couple of really, really great books that I have absolutely loved. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more content from me. All my links are down in the description below. Thank you for watching. Bye.